Saddam Sayyaleh is the founder of iLearn, a Jordan organization that creates sustainable education opportunities and safe knowledge spaces for children and youth in rural and disenfranchised communities in Jordan. And he's also working on the youth PVE project with UNESCO.
I was thinking, like, what can I do to the children? I was one of them in the camp. And from there, I thought that education is a key. I thought they need to see what I saw. And I created something called iLearn. And it was a response to my personal experience and also to the support of my friends who agreed with me that we need to start creating safe spaces where young people can express themselves, can gain opportunities and gain skills, and also see the potentials that they have. I would just like let you to imagine, think of it as a tree, and usually you have one apple if you always lived in the camp. But if you have a space that offers you opportunities or skills, think of it as more apples. So the young person can pick the apple that they would like to, instead of having one apple that they're stuck with.
To get your insight on how should young people be engaged in peace building and PVE, according to you?
Yeah. Thank you, Hamza. That was amazing. Maybe I'm a big supporter of informal education, extracurricular activities. I believe it adds a huge value to children, especially because when we grow, our minds are free, or our minds are not limited anymore. So the idea is we have these challenges. We absolutely do as young people. But we have a huge, huge problem with miscommunication. I'm here on this table today, and I don't feel young people are listening to me today. I feel like I'm talking to the UN, I'm talking to the people in this room, but I feel like we need to communicate in a bigger scale. Because we're sharing our stories with a group of people in this room, but I feel the bigger audience, which is the young people that we're trying to talk to, we need to reach them in a way or another. So I feel there is a media gap. There's a huge, huge media gap regarding how young people are receiving information and how are we thinking that we're reaching out to them. So we need to think of ways on delivering information that is essential to the needs of young people on the ground. And whether that by using grassroots organizations to deliver this information or talking to young leaders to use social media, for example, because it's a huge thing right now for young people, like that they use to receive information. And let's all agree, I mean, Jordan just recently had a lot of problems and protests because of the socioeconomic problem and the challenges economically. And right now we have 60,000 Syrian refugees in the borders, and we can't let them in because of the economy. And all I'm thinking about is I'm on Twitter, I'm on Facebook, reading what's happening back home, and I don't know what's real. Really, I don't know what's real. The information that we're receiving is completely like, it's a mixed feeling. Is it real? It's not. We read two tweets from two government officials, and they both are different, so we don't know. And misinformation is a huge issue right now that creates hate speech, that creates division, that promotes individualism. And young people, they don't see themselves in a global perspective. They see themselves in a very, like, my town, my village, my city, instead of seeing, what is the concern of the world right now. And this is like something I would love, for you to see. We're talking about youth leadership and security and PVE. In 2015, the Crown Prince of Jordan, he launched Amman Youth Declaration. And I believe everyone should read it. He brought everyone from different parts of the world to create the Amman Youth Declaration. And I think it was part of the progress study, if I'm not mistaken, or the resolution. And when I was reading it, there's so many things, and even the progress study that tackles a lot of what youth think or what they want. And looking at it is just, we need to start to think on how can we take these like words in a paper and putting it on the ground. We all know most of the problems. and we know what are the challenges. All we need to think about is, so how can we deliver the solutions? So it's all about delivering right now. I feel like we're in a point in life where we need to start doing action, more action and less talking. This is what this is my slogan at work. So it's like less talking, let's do more.
I don't know if you know how important this is. And one of the reasons is because that question that was posed of who's listening. And I'm sitting here and I'm just struck by the term side panel. Like we are on the side. Instead of this conversation being right at the center of how we redefine security and peace in the world. Because when I listen to the young voices at this table, and I mean, they have provided you with the executive summary of a progress study that we've just spent 2 years doing through 281 focus groups in 44 countries and 27 country case studies and 7 regional consultations. And the voice at this table captures everything that young people have been saying to us for the last 2 years. And what worries me is who's listening. Everyone at this table, all of the young people at this table thanked us for being here. Instead of us thanking them, we talk about no one being left behind. And when I listen to the voices at this table, I think maybe it's young people who are leaving the rest of us behind. And we need to rethink this because the power of the way in which they redefine these key questions are so important. No one at this table fits the stereotypes of victim or perpetrator that we so often use to categorize young people. No one at this table reflects the fact that predominantly governments treat youth as a problem to be solved rather than as a core asset in building peace and transforming the world. And so what I hear is a reflection of the key voice that came out of the progress study and to us all the time, that if we want to deal with the problem of violence and extremism, then we have to address the violence of exclusion. And until we start addressing the violence and the injustice of the exclusion of young people, we will deprive ourselves of the key resources and assets for changing this. Most young people are not violent and are not violent extremists. Actually, they reflect the everyday experience of the young people at this table. And yet we treat this as if the primary task we have is to prevent young people from joining violent extremist groups. Actually, the primary task we have is investing in the young people who are building resilience to this, who are changing the world in these ways. I mean, remember this. The Stimson Center, which is a US-based organization, just looking at the investment of from the US in hard security and law enforcement responses, basically said $2.8 trillion has been spent between 2002 and 2017 on hard security and law enforcement to counter terrorism. $1.75 billion in 2017 alone, just by the US. Yeah? And yet, how do we measure success of that investment? We don't. When we hear young people talking about what they do, we say, well, how do you measure impact? But when we spend these resources on counterterrorism, hard security, law enforcement approaches, we never say, how do we measure its achievements? In fact, mostly it's counterproductive. Mostly young people see their governments as more of a risk and a threat to them than they see violent extremist groups. Until we change that equation, we've got a real problem. But listen to the way the language in this room changed the conversation. This is what I heard. I heard Hamza talking about empathy and about the potential for the contagious nature of peace rather than the contagion of violence and conflict. I heard Khalid talking about hope and a sense of the future for young people. and mentorship and role models and nurturing. I heard Rahama talk about how important it is that young people and communities own these processes and the importance of dealing with social injustice. I heard Malik talking about resilience and the early interventions, working with younger children from 11 to 16 years old, and that critical word, trust. How do we build trust? How do we give young people a sense that they are trusted rather than seen as a problem? I heard Saddam talking about the power and importance of civic engagement, that story of going to India and suddenly realizing what other people's lives look like and the value and importance and power of being able to do something and invest in it. Civic engagement and education, safe spaces, places of expression. I heard Mohammed talk about stigmatization, diversity, dialogue and debate, the importance of critical thinking, and most importantly, in the case of Misrata and that instance, the sustainability, the durability of peace because young people are involved. Yeah? I heard people talking about the universality of this, that the experience of young people in the Netherlands is not that different to young people in these other parts of the world. And we need to stop treating this as just the unique, exclusive experience of young people in conflict-affected societies. I heard a gendered analysis which understood the importance of understanding the difference between experience of young girls and young boys and maybe the power of masculinity as a destructive force and something we need to start thinking about constructive, non-violent notions of masculine identity that contribute to peace. This is a different conversation about security. This is a different conversation about peace. And the problem is, are the people spending all the money on hard law enforcement in the room listening? Because what young people are offering, and this is what the progress study says, is an alternative path for investment. Instead of investing in the risk and the danger and the threat of young people and the tiny sliver who might join violent extremist groups, look at the resilience we have as an option for investment. It's in this room. It's inspiring. Thank you.
Thank you.